"Pick it up," she said, fingertips drumming the lacquered table, her manicured hand hovering expectantly in the spill of morning light. "Explain this call log now." Across from her he stared, posture solid, spine unbent. "Not my call." His voice was flat, almost too soft for the dozen eyes present. A phone vibrated against glass. Her assistant's face tightened, scanning the fresh message. She reached for the phone, intent, but he didn't flinch. "Play it for all of them," he said, folding his hands, "or just ask whose number it really is." One by one, the seated board members glanced at her, silent but alert, the air turned weighty and close. She touched the phone, paused. In that second, just before the voice played, the color drained from her cheeks, her hand trembling against the rim. "You always said you didn't care about names," she whispered, but it wasn't quite to him anymore. "Schedule the surgery." His answer came without hesitation, deliberate and cool. Her response hung unanswered in the stillness. One assistant blinked repeatedly, another ran a thumbnail along his notepad. No one moved. Sometimes the loudest silence is necessary. Stay until the very end. It started 2 weeks earlier, on the tail edge of hurricane season, in a shop with grease under the tiles and the scent of scorched brake pads. Elliot Hartman's day began beneath the chassis of a battered Crown Victoria, the kind of car that still haunted police auctions and outlasted marriages. His knees ached. The right one more than usual, twinges from a storm years earlier made sharper by the shop's cracked concrete floor. The sun, a pale line at the horizon, made silhouettes of sagging shelves and trays of rust-bitten tools. Overhead, the radio warbled out old Motown, static-laden and half-hearted. Elliot worked with the precision of a man whose time had become a resource finer than oil. Outside, the world measured itself in missed calls, 3 on his phone already, none with good news. A notification blinked about a declined credit card. His gloved thumb dismissed it, but the memory of bad news lingered. The rent on his one-bedroom apartment was overdue by nearly 2 weeks. His daughter's school was sending reminders, tuition reevaluation coming up, another kind of storm on the horizon. At precisely 7:08 a.m., the chrome and pearl doors of Avalon Country Club's service garage coughed open. A convoy of white-gloved valets spilled out, escorting a glossy Lexus and then a much older Range Rover. She entered with both doors held for her, heels orchestral on concrete. Madison Durant, Country Club president, crisp-mannered, eyes holding a private ledger of every slight. Breathless assistants orbited her, faces pinched by undue gravity. Elliot wiped his hands clean on a red shop towel, then began inspecting a service slip that shouldn't have come in today. A mystery brake job, marked urgent in block letters. "I want to see everyone out here," Madison announced, dark glasses never rising past the bridge of her nose. Her mouth moved as if each word cost money. "Something's missing from my office vault, painkillers to be specific. Last one in was you, Elliot, correct?" He stilled, not even the smallest twitch betrayed surprise. Around him, the room fell into that peculiar hush of bystanders eager not to become witnesses. Hank, the shop manager, cleared his throat. "It's procedure. We log every entry, Madison." "Show me the log then, now." Her tone clipped, every syllable a tap against some invisible calculator. Elliot set the service slip down, careful, as if placing it for evidence. "I check inventory, sign in, ask Brian or Julie." "No, you explain it," Madison pressed, voice steely, "or security calls the police." In the docking bay, a security guard already dialed 3 digits, thumb trembling. A few mechanics shuffled their boots in the dust, one mouthing, "He wouldn't." Another ducked his chin, remembering a favor from Elliot months ago. Lifting his gaze with mechanical patience, Elliot replied, "I didn't touch your vault. I'm not your problem." Her composure twitched, just enough for the senior valet to catch. "I decide who's the problem," Madison said, lips pressed sharp. His response was a quiet gesture, the neat folding of the towel, the set of his shoulders, a final glance at the car lifted on jacks. The accusation hung in the air, heavier than anything else with a price tag. But the line had been drawn. At home that evening, the overhead light in Elliot's kitchen flickered with every shift of wind, throwing his own shadow against the fridge in 100 uncertain shapes. The apartment was small, smells of engine grease and school glue refusing to leave no matter how many windows he left open. Nora bounced in, pressing her pressed flower in its glass frame tight against her chest, the artifact with which she measured her mornings and worries alike. Her shoes had new scuffs, one shoelace trailing, hair held in a barrette that must have come from the school's lost and found box. He watched her lay the flour on the breakfast table, its edges catching the little light there was. "It's still okay, right?" she asked. Her voice carried that clipped honesty only 6-year-olds managed. "Looks better than I do," Elliot replied, his mouth tightening, not a smile, more the weary version of one. She sat cross-legged, eyes glossing over a school note. "Dad, do you ever get tired of fixing everything?" He placed the cracked coffee mug firmly down, exhaled. "I'm not very good at it." Her head tilted. "You still try." He looked away. On the window ledge, the last bottle of his wife's perfume sat untouched, label worn flat. He sometimes caught the faint scent of it after long days, a memory of heart monitors and hospital wristbands tucked deep into drawers he rarely opened. On the fridge, below overdue bills and faded lunchbox notes, a folded corner of an old diploma was barely visible. Orthopedic surgery, Columbia University. He kept that face to the wall, behind a child's finger painting. He tore a slip of notepaper, scribbled inside the outline of a flower, "Lunch is tuna, be brave," sliding it into her box, knowing it was the ritual more than the advice that mattered. "You always write be brave," Nora mused. "Is that just for me or you too?" He nearly dropped the pen. "Mostly you." She grinned, pushing the flower frame closer, content with the answer. After tucking her to bed with the pressed flower propped on her nightstand, Elliot lingered in the dark, listening to the small sound of her breathing. For one moment, he allowed a hand to cover his eyes, pressing thumb and finger to worn skin, an old habit, half pain, half prayer. He left the kitchen light burning, just in case a little hope came home late. 53 floors above the city, in a penthouse where the windows blurred the border between sky and glass, Madison Durrant was a figure built for command. She moved with the economy of someone who knew her worth had been measured once publicly on a stage lined with marble and lawyers. In the marbled foyer, she stood before her assistant, 3 emails unread, coffee cooling. "Pull the ledger from last Friday, send it to my private inbox, then call the club's legal team." No apology, no context. A junior aide stepped forward. "The board wants the updated contract terms. Your father's care plan came from the hospital. Leave it on the table. No interruptions until noon." The aide retreated like the tide, quiet as regret. By the window, a framed photograph. A boy of perhaps 7, messy hair, eyes set wide apart, tracing the corners of a jigsaw puzzle with his fingertip. Below the picture, a bottle of melatonin, orange label half peeled. Madison checked her phone. School had messaged, bullying incident. Urgent, the all caps demanded. Her fist closed, knuckles whitening, but she did not respond. Instead, she thumbed open a text thread marked Dad Care Decisions. A sound from the back room, a child's quiet laugh, then the word robot, echoed down the marble hallway, vivid, real. She paused, torn for a half-beat, then turned away. The real origin wounds live in routine. She opened an old email, the one sent 3 years ago when her father's diagnosis arrived like a telegram in the middle of an executive offsite. "Heart failure, advanced. We need your signature for life support continuation." The cursor lingered over the answer. 72 hours left before the baseline review, the family lawyer reminded. Old ache, new urgency. She sipped the cold coffee. "Run the audit," she told her assistant, who re-entered, "and get the security tapes. Anyone who touches my office, flag them." Her gaze found the photograph again. The child's school had called 3 times that week. "He doesn't speak to anybody, but he lines up the erasers." The world liked answers, and she'd never liked confessing she didn't have any. A call came in from the club. "Miss Durrant, the mechanic is denying it," said board member Craig. "Legal wants this handled publicly if possible." "Do it, make an example," Madison ordered. "This doesn't touch my father's decision window." Her stare lingered on the city lights beyond, as if somewhere out there was a version of herself who knew what to say to a frightened child. There was none. The afternoon began poorly by any measure. The club's catering wing caught smoke just before the lunch rush. Faulty wiring, someone said, but the emergency lights refused to trigger, alarms silent, a consequence of cut corners, quick hands. Elliot was sent cross-campus to help. He arrived as a witness, the flames licking up beneath a service counter, kitchen staff evacuating with hasty, frightened steps. He read chaos with the eye of someone who'd memorized crisis better than most. Oxygen tubes, exits, fire panel, 6 ways in and out. In the panic, most missed the small boy crouched behind a prep counter, arms around his knees, unmoving. No one else noticed, the boy, silent, head tipped to one side. "Hey," Elliot said, and the boy, shock perfect, didn't answer. The air tasted of chemicals and scorched carpeting. He ducked low, crawling past smoke, calling softly, "It's safe. Come here, kid." No answer. He reached, hands gentle, and caught the boy's wrist. Weightless, cold skin. As he pulled him close, the boy's mouth formed no protest, but one hand clutched at Elliot's sleeve, desperate. "Not the wiring, gas leak under the range." Elliot's voice was flat, precise. "You've got 20 seconds tops." No one heard, so he swept his jacket over the boy's head and pulled him against his own chest, low enough not to breathe in the worst of the heat, and carried him across burning tiles toward the back door, dodging embers and fallen pans. A kitchen worker fumbled with their phone, face pale. Nobody else saw him, how'd you know? Elliot set the boy down, checking for burns with practiced hands, no hesitation, no wasted movement. "It's not the wiring, it's the gas," he repeated. "Get everyone out, now." When the first responders arrived, they found the fire contained, the air thin but clear of casualties. The boy, unharmed but silent as ever, was wrapped in a thick coat, 2 hands clinging to his rescuer's arm as if to a fixed star. Madison arrived, hair pinned, blazer sharp. She scanned the scene, eyes darting over firefighters, then settling on Elliot with that cool, half-mocking smile. "Lucky break," she said, arms folded. "You always show up where the mess is." A club staffer, Lanny, in finance, stood nearby, notebook clutched tight. She had seen too much to accept luck. "He's right," could have been a tragedy. Madison's gaze dismissed the implication. "He's not credentialed for emergencies. Liability, if anything. Document this, Lanny." She turned on her heel, trailing the scent of expensive fixers and fear. Lanny watched Elliot check the boy's pulse again, moving with a certainty that unsettled her. She made a note, sure this wasn't over. He had seen this before, 20 years ago. Lanny's doubts grew into a quiet compulsion. That evening, while cross-referencing the day's service orders, she pulled up the shop's employment records. Hartman Elliott, employment start date 2 years prior. No social links, no visible resume on file, just the shadow of a prior existence. She checked a secondary database, one tied to the club's insurance vendor. It took time, punching in dates and legal names. Then she paused, fingertips cooling, as an old declination letter surfaced. Medical Board of Georgia, declined reinstatement, post-fellowship, personal reasons disclosed. That night she looped in her friend Eric from Human Resources. "You ever hear of him before?" she asked. Eric shrugged, keeps to himself. But those hands, he bandaged up Benny the day he sliced his thumb, didn't even need to look. Lanny saved the letter. Something about the phrasing, family emergency, cannot assume position, echoed her own experience. The quiet dignity of someone refusing more money than most imagined. Elsewhere, Nora sat cross-legged on her twin bed, pressed flower held aloft, light from the hallway painting the room in panels of gold and gray. "Daddy," she called, "did you know some flowers last longer when you press them?" He dried his hands, stilled by the simple certainty in her voice. "Why that?" "It's not about the flower, it's who takes care of it. Maybe that's why." He sat on her bed, blanket rough against his fingers. "You taking care of yours?" She nodded. "It isn't lonely anymore." He didn't answer at first. The clock ticked, the time pressure of tuition review growing more real with each hour. He slid her locket closed, tucked her in. 2 days later, the deadline was stamped across his phone. Life support continuation authorization expires, 72 hours. At dawn, a tow truck lurked outside the club's entrance, paint too clean for the shady intent behind it. The driver, heavy-jawed and blithe in a company polo, waited for Lanny to emerge from the building, crook of a smile visible before any exchange. You hear about Hartman, he whispered, tongue darting over his teeth. She eyed him, not your concern. He leaned on the hood, voice low. Lady in the office wants his car gone, says he's a thief. Club rules. She leveled her gaze. I've seen the rules, you're not on any approved list. He shrugged, all the same to me, get out of the way. Get a written order or I'll call legal. They watched each other, tension strung tight. He relented, stepping back, muttering about too many busybodies. That afternoon, Elliot was called into a meeting. Lanny found him washing tools, the faint scent of engine cleaner on his cuffs. She handed him the letter quietly, no drama. Did you turn this down? She asked, voice gentle but intent. He thumbed the page, recognition flickered but did not land. I did. Why would you? This kind of thing changes lives. He replaced her gaze with the cold certainty of a man who'd walked away for a reason. My daughter deserves a life I can't give from a hospital, not now. She nodded, folding her worries. You don't have to explain. A beat later, she added, if you need an advocate, I can help. He met her eyes. I'm not after advocacy, just a quiet shop. Later, he received a quiet offer, 2 days' pay to leave quietly, a bribe poorly concealed. He refused the money. You can have my service bay, not my story. The crisis would not wait. That night, Madison sat with her father's file flicked open beside her phone, the minutes counting down. In her peripheral, her son lined up Lego bricks by color and size, untouched by TV noise. Elliot's daughter in her room pressed the flower between her palms, whispering, You still try, Dad. The hard things always close in together. The days grew sharper, the retaliation more bold. Madison ordered a formal audit of the auto shop, blacklisting Elliot's ID badge. His pay was docked pending investigation, and school drop-off became a silent trip, a teacher at the gate, new rules, a sideways glance at Nora. Elliot's car was blocked in the garage one afternoon, a security guard reciting, Club procedure, sir. You're not authorized anymore. Nora clutched his hand, locket pressed so hard it left an imprint. Did you make someone mad? She whispered as they trudged home. He shrugged, keeping his eyes fixed forward. At home, he placed a lunch note on the counter. It's okay, open the flower. Lanny called late. Madison's taking this personally, she warned, tone sharp. She has enough pull for HR to honor the blacklist. You should stay under the radar. Elliot's reply was only a sigh, a thumb smoothing over the latch of Nora's flower frame. He dialed a number, voice measured. It's Hartman, yes, 24 hours left. If they ask, tell them I'm still on standby. Who or what he meant, none could say. School security flagged Nora for bringing glass to class, the frame too visible, her story not enough. Club rules, they said. She missed recess that day. The isolation felt both heavy and familiar. He should not have made this her problem. The day of reckoning arrived without ceremony, the boardroom assembled beneath chandeliers that caught no warmth, just the hard reflection of black suits and phones set to silent. Madison presided at the head of the room, flanked by her father's legal proxy and club directors angling for their slice. Elliot entered uninvited, posture a touch different, dark shirt buttoned at the collar, hands no longer stained with oil, his daughter's lunch note folded neatly among his papers. Lanny stood at the margin, nerves twisted into her skirt pocket. Madison tapped the screen of her phone. Since everyone's here, one matter before the vote. Assistant set a speakerphone in the center of the table, live line blinking red. She began crisply, we have an unauthorized call made from the service line, matching this number. The display glowed with Elliot's cell number. Want to explain who you called? She snapped, voice precise, clipped. Elliot didn't answer. His gaze flicked from her to the bystanders, then to Lanny, whose head inclined just so. Let's hear the call, Lanny said, soft but insistent. Madison froze, palm hovering over the phone. In that second, the room stilled. Her own son's photo sat angled toward her on the credenza, witness to what came next. Play it for all of them, or just ask whose number it really is, Elliot said, folding his hands. You can find my record, but you can't erase what happened 2 years ago. Madison's face lost animation, her fingers clutching the bridge of her nose. You always said you didn't care about names. He didn't blink. Schedule the surgery. One assistant chewed his thumbnail until it bled. A board member's pen tapped out a hesitant rhythm. Lanny looked between them, voice catching. She's been paying your fee out of club contracts, Lanny revealed, for months. Redirected through consulting funds, I found the ledgers. The child he saved last week is hers. Madison's knees softened. The color left her face from forehead down. You think any of this matters? She tried, but only 2 board members risked looking up. He replied, it mattered the day you lied, and you know it. Silence. You're not credentialed, a director interjected. Lanny stepped in. He's more credentialed than anyone in this building. No one moved. Madison reached for words and caught only the echo of her own order. Explain this call log now, but no answer came. The silence did not break. 6 months later, the club's revenue stream had buckled. Top client contract pulled, citing negligence and falsification of invoices. 30% of annual revenue evaporated. Madison, no longer president, retreated from the board, leveraging what remained of her reputation to straighten out what she could for her son. Nora now ran the school garden committee. On her desk, the pressed flowers glass frame was joined by a new note. Lunch is grilled cheese, BU. Lanny, promoted to operations chief, sometimes lunching with Elliot, made a habit of walking Nora home on odd Fridays. That evening, Nora helped stack dishes. She paused, flower in hand. Dad, is it hard to be brave? He leaned lower, matching her level, voice quiet in the dusklit kitchen. Most days, but it's simpler when you know what matters. She slid the glass frame across and grinned. You tried anyway. He didn't need to answer. Value in the end is not what the world names it, nor what is left unspoken in the margins of a ledger. Sometimes it is the small resolve to do what can be done for a friendless child, a daughter watching, a silence that holds the weight of everything lost and claimed again. In certain lives, it is enough to bear honest witness, to stand and speak when the world mislabels the thief and the healer. In that living quiet, the things that truly matter stay pressed between days, fragile, intact, waiting to become memory. One Saturday in late spring, Elliot found himself slicing apples for Nora's lunch, sunlight pooling across the counter. The shop had run lean these last months, but the worst of the noise had quieted. After the inquest, the club board floundered briefly before electing a new president. Hank had stuck around, hunch-shouldered but loyal, sometimes dropping an extra day's work Elliot's way. Nora skidded in, her shoes squeaking. You coming to the school garden today? We have seedlings to plant. He dusted flour from his hands, wouldn't dream of missing it. She beamed, tipping her nose toward the fridge where another note waited, bloom where you're planted. It was their running joke now. Lanny said she'd help set up the trellises, Nora piped, bouncing. She's bringing those purple gloves you said you liked. Elliot huffed a little laugh. She never forgets. He shrugged into his jacket, the one without oil stains, and tied Nora's shoelaces tight as old promises. Outside, the world was diluted green and new. They walked hand in hand toward the school, the air electric with the early riot of crickets. Nora paused at the gate, pointing to a row of small, fragile plants. These are mine, well ours, Lanny S2, see how they're getting tall. He stooped, brushing a leaf between thumb and finger. You gave them room to grow, that's all anything needs. She squinted up at him, like you in the shop. His smile was quiet, something like that. Lanny appeared, sleeves pushed up, a coil of twine in one hand and the telltale purple gloves in the other. She knelt beside Nora, anchoring the twine around a bamboo stake. Let's get these tomatoes started, Captain. Nora giggled, saluting. Aye. Lanny caught Elliot's glance over Nora's bent head. You look rested, not used to it, are you? He slid his hands into his pockets. Sometimes peace is harder to trust than trouble. Lanny nodded, a few traces of the old storm in her face. You ever think of going back surgery, I mean? He shook his head, looking past her toward the rows of students kneeling in afternoon light. This is different, closer. Here, I know what matters. She threaded the twine, gentle. I'm glad you stayed. The club's quieter now. People notice kindness a little more. Nora pulled a sunflower seed from her pocket, pressing it into Elliot's palm. Plant this one, please, for luck. He knelt dirt cool beneath his thumb and pressed the seed into dark earth. For a moment, the old ache of the operating room, that unique silence, burned along his nerves. He remembered what it felt like to hold a life in his hands, the weight and risk of it. Here, it translated differently, quieter, perhaps less urgent, but meaningful all the same. After planting, they stood and brushed off. Lanny shaded her eyes, scanning the parking lot. Saw Madison last week. She's volunteering at the city clinic. Said she started coming after her father passed. He blinked, surprise flickering through him. She didn't have to tell you that. True, Lanny said. People change. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. Nora planted the last sprout and wiped her brow. We're all done. They surveyed the neat rows, laughter and kid chatter drifting down. The world spun on in its small, unpredictable way, and for the first time in a long while, Elliot felt no urgent need to be elsewhere. Dad, Nora began as they gathered tools. Are you ever scared you won't know what to do? He folded the gloves, handed them back to Lanny. Sometimes, but you don't need all the answers to start helping. She mulled it over. Like that time I found the stray kitten and you said we'd figure it out. Exactly like that. On the walk home, Nora's backpack thumped with a fresh bundle of earth and loose seed packets. They stopped at the corner store for milk. The cashier, who knew their names by now, slipped Nora an extra sticker. Elliot caught his eye, the kind of thank you couldn't fit into words. Their apartment was brighter, a few more flowers on the sill, Nora's drawings lined up like milestones. He checked his email, a new offer from a mobile clinic upstate, but he closed the tab. The call for Dr. Hartman didn't echo so tightly in his chest anymore. He answered to Dad now, and that fit better. Evenings passed in small, intentional rituals, plates clinking, Nora's school stories, the news humming low. Sometimes Lanny stopped by, sharing coffee, club gossip, the comfort of company that asked nothing in return. One night as thunder rolled distantly, Nora lingered by the window. Tomorrow's field day, can you come watch? Elliot dried his hands on a towel, wouldn't miss it. She let the curtain fall back into place. Some of the kids say I'm lucky because I have you. He crouched, heart pinched, hands framing her face gentle as breath. I'm the lucky one. She thought about this, nodding as if filing the information for later. It was the kind of confidence he never learned for himself. The storm blew through that night, sheets of rain drumming against the glass. It felt like a benediction. In the ruined shell of the club's old catering wing, new workers hammered fresh supports. Lanny, clipboard in hand, supervised. Madison arrived one afternoon in jeans, donating old files and leftover kitchen gear. She said little, tucking her hands in her pockets as Lanny reported quietly, revenue S up. Staff turnover is down. Madison's smile was the uncertain kind, equal parts regret and hope. My father always said places outlive people. Sometimes I think he was right, sometimes I hope he was. You did all right, Lanny replied after a pause. You tried what you could, the rest is up to us, whoever's left. Madison's son waited outside in a blue cap, tracing patterns in dust with his shoe. She thanked Lanny and left, touching her child's shoulder as they ascended the steps together. At dusk, Elliot and Nora sat on their stoop watching the streetlights wink on. They passed the pressed flower frame between them, the glass now scratched at the corners but still whole. Do you think it will last? Nora asked. The flower, I mean. Not forever, Elliot admitted, voice careful, but long enough for you to remember what it looked like. Sometimes that's all we get. She leaned against him, silent for a long minute. Can we press another? We'll press 100 if you want. She grinned, pulling her knees up under her chin. It's easier to be brave when you're not alone. The words settled into his chest, warm and strange. He watched the trailing lights of passing cars, the stumble of footsteps on cracked pavement, the quiet persistence of their little world. Inside, Nora arranged her notes on the fridge, a fresh one clipped above all the rest. Tomorrow, plant hope. Elliot stared at it, a smile rising unasked. Tomorrow was not promised, nor safe, nor even simple. But for tonight, there would be peace, a child's hand in his, the world outside knitted soft by summer's edge, the hush of wounds healing slow and stubborn. He turned off the kitchen light later than usual, letting the dark fill in the corners. In the space between heartbeats, when all was finally still, he could almost believe that quiet was enough. And in that quiet, possibility awaited, the honest kind, rooted in hard-won ground, dared into bloom by an ordinary kind of courage. Sunday morning arrived gentle, a pale wash of sun over the cracked windowsill, the hum of traffic softened by the floral hush of dawn. Elliot woke early. For once, the ache in his knee was only background, not command. He lay for a few moments listening to Nora's quiet breathing from the next room and let contentment settle, uncertain but real. Nora burst into the kitchen, cheeks flushed, hair wild as ever. She held out 2 slips of paper, one for herself, one for him. "Field day numbers," she said, beaming. "We're a team." He grinned, pinning the slip to her shirt with ceremonial importance. "Team Hartman," he intoned, and she saluted. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with the low anticipation that only a school event can summon. Parents gathered at chain-link fences, teachers waving clipboards, and children gleaming with the possibility of victory. The grass was still wet when they arrived, shoes damp before the first whistle. Lanny stood by the orange cones, waving them forward. "Three-legged race, sign here," she called. She wore her purple gloves, pressed a reassuring squeeze to Elliot's shoulder. "You nervous?" "I haven't run in public since the last millennium," he replied, but met her friendly smirk with one of his own. Nora bounced at his side, wriggling as Lanny tied the band around their ankles. "We'll go slow," she promised. When the race started, Elliot and Nora stumbled, laughed, caught a rhythm. He held her hand, she steadied his gait. They didn't win, but they didn't fall, and by the time they crossed the finish, breathless and victorious on their own terms, the cheer Nora let loose was loud enough for 2. "Best team ever," she pronounced, tucking her field day ribbon into her pocket with the gravity of treasure. Hours later, back home, Elliot filled 2 glasses with lemonade, ice clinking in the late afternoon heat. Nora watched him from the table, twirling the ribbon. "Dad," she said, voice curious, "did you ever wish things turned out different?" He set her glass down, paused. "Sometimes, but if they did, maybe we wouldn't have found this." She thought about it. "I think this is good enough." "It is," he agreed, drawing her close. On the fridge, the note waited, "Plant hope." Nora, smiling, pressed another flower between napkin layers, this time for both of them, another promise nestled in the quiet. And as dusk curled warm around their small apartment, Elliot understood the brave thing was never fixing everything. It was loving what you could save. It was staying even when it hurt. It was letting hope grow, stubborn as a pressed bloom, into whatever tomorrow would allow.